NSFW, what is the most horrific event that you have personally witnessed? We were playing on Discord when my friend's father died. I listened frozen to the howls of the family, and them trying to give CPR. It fucked me up a little at its spelling. My ex-girlfriend's brother committed suicide on his birthday, Valentine's Day. His parents went to the store to get him a cake. Upon arriving home, they had a message on the machine that he had killed himself at a friend's house, with a cake at the dinner table. I watched family members pulling their own hair out, screaming in horror. For weeks, cries and howls of pure anguish. Oh God. Oh God, oh God, no. Oh my God. No. It makes me cry now. It will forever haunt me. The most pain I've seen. The cake stayed in the freezer for a year. After about 3 days I remembered he had a kitten in his room. No one could get themselves to go in his room. So I did. The window was open and the room was cold. I assumed the cat jumped out the window. I looked all over and almost gave up. The cat was under a pile of clothes on the bed, alive. He had eaten an old half-eaten hamburger in the trash, ate all of it but the onions. A year later, the youngest brother was not taking the loss well and was spiraling into depression and suicide. The whole family started drinking. It was a snowball effect after that. My dog died a week after the year of the suicide, and my girlfriend of 8 years was no longer the girl I knew. Alcohol and pills became priority for her and her family. The resection hit and I was out of work. I then found myself depressed and full of thoughts of suicide. My girlfriend started not coming home with people I didn't know. She became very cold and didn't love me anymore. I got a call from a friend saying my girlfriend was cheating on me. Soon after was confirmed. Got a job and sold all of my stuff, then moved out on my own. I felt true pain reading this. It's hard to express something like this in words. I'm glad you got over for some degree. Medical student here. Helped do chest compressions on a code blue once. Was fairly routine code, just chest compressions for about 45 minutes on an elderly man who had a history of heart problem. Eventually they called the code because he didn't have a shockable rhythm. The horrific part wasn't seeing a patient die in a code. That part is almost routine because of how rare it is to actually get someone back after chest compressions start. The horrific part was walking out into the hallway and seeing the patient's entire family huddled together, embracing each other, and just bawling their eyes out. It wasn't the usual sad cry someone has. It was a hysterical, disturbed cry of just emotional pain. One you never want to hear and one that is still haunting to think about. That was incredibly difficult to watch. I had to step away from the rounding team so they did see me cry. I don't know if this will be any consolation, or even what field you're trying to get into, but if you wind up in a specialty where that's a daily occurrence, it gets easier to compartmentalize with time. When I saw the wreckage my 17-year-old son died in after crashing into a tree, the part that is horrific isn't about the crunched up hunk of metal, it was the lack of blood inside the car. Yeah, I saw pieces of my son's brain, but hardly any. What the officer said is the part that is horrific. The lack of blood means he died instantly and likely without pain. That's fantastic. And horrible. It's horrific. That's horrible. I'm really sorry. I hope you find some comfort in knowing he passed without any pain. Honestly, that is the only comfort, and it still will lax. Thanks. I've witnessed some pretty messed up stuff, but this was the most horrific to me psychologically and emotionally. A close friend and I found another one of our friends dead, OD'd in the back seat of his truck. Called the authorities. Was made to stand around for about an hour and a half waiting for detectives to question me. While waiting I was sitting on a rock nearby, and I had to watch one by one as his lifelong friends came to see the body. The pure grief and pain of the cries that came out of those people as they each peeked in the backseat was horrific. I wanted to leave so badly, but I had to wait for the detectives to question me. I will never forget the sound and the look on their face as their body gave itself up to grief. as they crumpled down into a heap of despair. "Rip Dave, real homie." This for me was not horrific but the saddest thing to see. My mom trying to speak while on her deathbed. She seemed adamant in that it was very important for me to understand her, but she didn't have the strength. Holding her hand and wiping her tears away while her eyes turned pale, she took her last breath and she was gone. Cancer sucks. My wife died of metastatic cancer that spread to her brain. Over just a few weeks' time she went from lucid to uncommunicative due to the tumors damaging the language centers of her brain. There were a few weeks where she formed nonsense sentences that made perfect sense to her. "Bring me my far colors" meant that she wanted me to bring her the veggie tray from the refrigerator. Eventually, she had a mini stroke that turned off her speech center completely. It broke my heart. Was sitting in a car when there was this old guy just kinda loitering outside a shop at a petrol station when two guys on a scooter pulled up and shot him. This was like 2 meters from my car. When I was younger, we had an outside cat in the neighborhood who I was close to. We called him Bubba. One day after returning from school, I was playing outside in my front yard and saw him. My family and I lived by a highway, and he was trying to cross it from the other side, and as he did was hit by a large black truck. As soon as it happened I went running to my parents and told them about it, and they did believe me. It took me at least 30 minutes of crying and trying to drag them outside to look. At first from the front yard they said it wasn't him, but I knew it was. Eventually they decided to drive over, taking me with them to go take a closer look, and like I had said before, it was him. The way the truck hit him caused his throat to split open and you could see the knot bulging out. It wasn't something I wanted to see or ever want to see again. Why did your parents not believe you? When I was like 12 or 13, some homeless guy on bath salts ended up jumping naked off of a bridge onto a super busy highway during morning traffic and got creamed by a semi. It dragged him across the ground. I didn't see that specific part, but as traffic started flowing around it finally, I accidentally saw the body and the image of it is still engraved in my brain to this day. Gives me chills just thinking about it. Post-edit. To this day the blood smear is still on the highway where he got hit. Reminds me of another story from another Redditor who hit someone on a highway. Turns out you have the responsibility to clean your car, truck if it happens. I can imagine what that truck driver went through. Bonus memorable quote from that story. "Ma'am, dear, don't wear Nikes." I remember reading that one too, in them describing the meat and hair chunks inside the car's frame and tires that had to be cleaned out by themselves. During my forensic medicine rotation in med school when I was attending an autopsy, I got a text from my friend saying she couldn't make it to her class because a guy jumped in front of a train one stop before hers and all underground trains were stopped until they could deal with the aftermath. Hours later they bring in a fresh body in several separate bags. It was the guy that committed suicide. I'm not very sensitive when it comes to gore, even for someone in medicine, but I can't forget the image of his decapitated head looking at me from the table they set it on. Had to excuse myself and go outside to get some fresh air, and immediately abandoned forensic medicine as my second choice of specialty after that. Coming up Half Dome in Yosemite on a sunny day with the GF. On the ladder section it was jammed. People going up the outside of the ladder in order to get up quicker. I had been up twice before and never seen it this crowded before. I told my GF, "This is nuts, someone's going to get her." Coming back down it was even more nuts as it was getting later in the day and people were getting desperate to get up and down before sunset. One guy lost his footing about 10 yards above us and started sliding. As he slid he was completely silent, on his belly, arms and legs outstretched. People were yelling competing and nonsensical advice, and as he went by me he was about 4 feet away, just outside arm's reach. I locked eyes with him as he went past. He just looked dumbfounded. He slid past and down that slick granite. Easily a few 100-yard slide, plenty of time for him and the hundreds of people on the ladder to anticipate his fate and off into the abyss. Just like that. Of course he died and his companions were so shaken they had to airlift to the top. He was one of the people that passed us going up on the outside of the ropes, and he paid for his lack of care, attention with his life. It was horrific how quickly it all happened and how there was nothing I could do. Years later they now require passes to reserve a spot so it does not get overcrowded. I saw our neighbor's beautiful collie get hit head-on and killed by a driver speeding through the neighborhood. As a kid, witnessing the driver never hit the dog and just take off, with a smirk on his face, made for horrific nightmares thereafter. The most difficult part, as I once described, was finding our neighbor and telling him what had happened. I'll never forget the look in his face. I wish that man was John Wick. Me and a friend were going to a bar that was off the side of a multi-lane highway. We parked on the street and I was standing on the sidewalk looking at my friend who was standing behind her car, talking on the phone with another friend trying to figure out where they were. Out of nowhere she grabs my shirt and yanks me toward her into the highway, and in slow motion I see this huge truck flying down the sidewalk, ricocheting between the cars parked and the fence. We dove into the concrete and heard the truck come to a final crash. I was in shock as we picked ourselves up. I was speechless. My friend, however, was just pissed and screaming at the truck. A pole from the fence had managed to whack her in the leg. Nothing serious, but it hurt. I just silently watched as the man in the truck moved to the passenger's